The Golden Girls debuted on NBC in 1985, and for the next 7 years, regardless of your age, fans both young and old were delighted by the amazing chemistry of the core 4 actresses, Rue McClanahan, Estelle Getty, and especially Bea Arthur and Betty White. Over the course of the show's run, all of the actresses won Emmy Awards for their work. Truly an amazing accomplishment. Now, before I get started talking about Betty and Bea, I just want to state for the record that I think these 4 ladies were just the best. Their chemistry, the way they worked together, it was really a thing of beauty. However, behind all of the warmth and laughter, there were times while the show was on the air that Bea Arthur and Betty White were not always on speaking terms with each other, and if they were speaking, the things that Bea would say weren't always the nicest. Why? Well, it's hard to pinpoint the actual reason, other than to say that Betty White just kind of bugged Bea. Her positivity and her constant state of chipperness rubbed Bea the wrong way. If you think about it, it's not all that hard to imagine. We've all found ourselves in situations where someone's unfailing optimism and unending cheerfulness has just gotten on our nerves. At least I have. Now imagine it 24/7, all of the time. The more that Bea was around Betty, the less that she could handle her always on pleasant demeanor. Of course, Bea isn't around to corroborate these stories anymore, but family members have acknowledged that Ms. Arthur's personality was a little more acerbic and that from time to time, she seemed to need to have someone around to pick on, just a little bit. One example of this was the fact that Bea was frequently infuriated by Betty White's journeys into the studio audience to visit with audience members in between takes. This would make her so angry because she thought it was very unprofessional and it made the other cast members look less friendly, even though they were simply trying to stay in character. In a 2017 interview with Closer magazine, Bea's adopted son Matthew Sachs divulged some of the reasons for the tension behind the scenes. Here's his quote. "My mom unknowingly carried the attitude that it was fun to have someone to be angry at. It was almost like Betty became her nemesis, someone she could always roll her eyes about at work," Sachs told Closer. But things weren't always so bad between the actresses, with Sachs recalling the times where Betty and Bea would ride together to work. And in fact, Rue McClanahan, who played Blanche Devereaux, said that there were times when Arthur wouldn't go to lunch without her friend Betty White in attendance. Betty White herself has acknowledged that things weren't always great between her and Bea. She's been quoted as saying this, "Bea was not that fond of me. She found me a pain in the neck sometimes. I think it was my positive attitude, and that made her so mad. Sometimes if I was happy, she would just get furious." That said, there are others who point out that it might not have been just Betty White's positive demeanor that got Bea riled up. In fact, when an earlier version of this video was on YouTube, longtime Golden Girls fan Delana Johnson said this, "I know Betty thought Bea couldn't stand her, but come on, it wasn't from being overly optimistic. Watch interviews and blooper reels. Betty tries to take over, and there are clips of her throwing Bea under the bus. I like Betty as an actress, but I do believe Bea had good reason." And in an interview that can be found here on YouTube with one of the show's producers, Christopher Lloyd. No, not that Christopher Lloyd. Anyway, Lloyd shares that Betty's gift was her ability to get the audience on her side, something that Bea struggled with because of her own personality. Bea was more of an introvert, whereas Betty, yep, that one's not hard to figure out. Extrovert all the way. Regardless of their personal issues, there was a connection, an undeniable connection between these two talented ladies. And at the end of the day, who cares about what happened off camera? Their primary responsibility as cast members of the Golden Girls was to make us laugh. And they both did that so very well. As long as we're on the topic of the Golden Girls, it sounds like one of Jane Lynch's next projects is a half-hour sitcom that is being pitched as a Golden Girls for today. One of my favorite 80s singers, Cyndi Lauper, is part of the cast as well, so I'm excited to see this thing happen. Much like the comment here on writer Carol Leifer's Facebook page, I think this show has the potential to be really great. So that's it. Let me know what you think in the comments section, and while you're at it, click on that thumbs up icon if you enjoyed this video. And what the heck, why not consider subscribing to my channel? I talk about music, movies, and television, mostly from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. You know, the good stuff. But most importantly, and as always, thank you so much for watching.